Boy stops dad's wedding, reveals shocking truth about his fiancée. Dad calls 911 immediately. The warm morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of a quaint chapel in a small Midwestern town, casting mosaic rainbows across the polished pews. Rows of guests, some fanning themselves with wedding programs, whispered eagerly as they awaited the arrival of the bride. At the altar stood Andrew Parker, a 41-year-old widower with an earnest smile, adjusting the lapel on his tailored suit. Next to him, holding a small velvet ring pillow, was his 10-year-old son, Logan Parker, who looked sharp in a matching suit. Yet there was no denying the troubled look in Logan's dark brown eyes as he glanced anxiously between his father and the chapel doors. Moments earlier, Andrew had knelt down to straighten Logan's tie. "Hey, champ," Andrew said, his voice both excited and reassuring. "You okay?" Logan forced a tiny smile. "I'm okay, Dad," he replied, though his fists were clenched tightly around the ring pillow. In truth, Logan was not okay. For months, he had carried a secret about his soon-to-be stepmother, Natalie Richardson, a 35-year-old whose sparkling blue eyes and golden hair had captivated Andrew from the moment they met. Natalie seemed perfect on the surface, kind, poised, and understanding. But when Andrew wasn't around, her facade melted into cold stares and callous remarks aimed squarely at Logan. Worse still, Logan had overheard unsettling conversations that hinted at a far darker plan. Now, as the organist struck up the first notes of the wedding march, Logan's heart pounded like a drum. He watched the chapel doors swing wide open, revealing Natalie, radiant in a flowing ivory gown with intricate lace details. She floated forward with a practiced smile that dazzled every guest in the room. Andrew's face glowed with adoration. But Logan's gaze darted to the floor. He already knew her sweetness was an illusion. Logan remembered the crisp fall afternoon some 6 months ago when he had first met Natalie. He'd been sitting on the curb outside his elementary school, kicking at the fallen leaves scattered across the sidewalk, waiting for his father's familiar SUV. Andrew was late that day, caught in traffic on the interstate about 5 miles from the school, yet he arrived beaming. "Son," Andrew had announced, practically sprinting around the car to open the passenger door. "I want you to meet someone special." Natalie hopped out, wearing a light jacket and jeans. She extended her hand with a warm smile. "Hi, Logan. I've heard so much about you," she cooed. At first, Logan felt a flicker of hope. His mother had passed away 2 years earlier, and it had been just him and his dad in their small suburban home. Maybe this new woman could bring some joy back into their lives. But as weeks turned into months, Logan noticed more and more inconsistencies in Natalie's behavior. When Andrew was around, Natalie was sugary sweet, always inquiring about Logan's day at school, helping with dinner, or even playfully tussling his hair. The moment Andrew left the room, however, Natalie became a different person. Cold remarks, disapproving glances, and subtle criticisms chipped away at Logan's confidence. The first real clash occurred one evening when Andrew worked late. Natalie was supposed to be looking after Logan, who was then 9 years old but about to turn 10. Exhausted from homework, Logan tried to tell Natalie about a science project involving the solar system. "Natalie," he had started, "I learned about Mars and Jupiter today." "I'm busy," Natalie cut him off, her attention glued to her cell phone. "Do me a favor and eat your dinner quietly." Her dismissive tone stung. Feeling dejected, Logan sank lower in his chair and fiddled with his fork. After a silent few minutes, he mustered the courage to speak again. "Logan," she snapped, dropping her phone onto the table. "I said quietly. I can't concentrate with you talking every second." Shocked and hurt, Logan swallowed his words. Later that night, when Andrew came home, Natalie instantly reverted to her sweet persona. She whispered endearments, offered to make him a late-night snack, and even mentioned that Logan had done well on his homework. Andrew, happy to see the harmony he'd longed for, never suspected a thing. Yet Logan's faith in Natalie eroded more each day. As the winter holidays approached, Andrew's excitement over his engagement to Natalie reached new heights. He went shopping for Christmas presents, humming holiday tunes under his breath. He even picked out the perfect ring, a simple but elegant band set with small diamonds, which Natalie gushed over in front of him. One Saturday afternoon, Andrew left to pick up groceries and run errands, telling Logan and Natalie he'd be back in about 45 minutes. Logan settled onto the living room couch to watch cartoons. As he flipped to his favorite channel, Natalie strode in. "Turn that off," she said tersely, pointing to the TV. "It's too loud. I'm trying to work." Startled, Logan fumbled for the remote and accidentally knocked over his glass of orange juice. It splashed onto the coffee table and pooled into the beige carpet. "Sorry," Logan stuttered, jumping up to grab a towel from the kitchen. "I'll clean." Before he could finish, Natalie yanked him away from the spill by his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Look at this mess," she hissed, her face twisted with anger. "You clumsy, careless boy." Tears welled in Logan's eyes. I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll clean it up." Natalie tightened her grip. "You'd better. And if you tell your father about this, you'll regret it." That night, when Andrew returned, Natalie greeted him at the door with a radiant smile and a quick kiss, exclaiming, "You've been gone forever. Let me help you put those groceries away." Logan, standing on the stairs, silently rubbed the red mark on his arm, his stomach twisting in knots. Logan grew more anxious by the day. He noticed how his dad remained blissfully unaware of Natalie's cruel streak. Andrew was too enamored with the idea of having a complete family again. With the wedding approaching in a few short months, Andrew attributed all of Logan's concerns to nerves about having a stepmother. Finally, one evening, Logan mustered the courage to approach his father. Andrew was in his small home office, going over some spreadsheets for work. Logan entered hesitantly, feeling the soft carpet under his socks and the cool blast of the air conditioner set to 72°F. "Dad," he began, wringing his hands. "I need to tell you something about Natalie." Andrew closed his laptop and gave Logan his full attention. "Sure, buddy, shoot." She's different when you're not here," Logan blurted. "She's mean sometimes. She yells and she told me not to say anything." Andrew's face fell, replaced by a look of confusion. "Logan, I know you're worried about this big change, but Natalie is really trying. Maybe you're just misunderstanding each other." Logan felt his heart sink. "Dad, I'm not misunderstanding anything. Listen," Andrew said, exhaling deeply. "Natalie loves both of us. I'm sure once she's officially part of the family, things will settle down. I need you to give her a fair chance. Promise me?" Logan swallowed hard. His father's gentle but dismissive tone made it clear he wouldn't push Natalie on the issue. "I promise," he said quietly, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. From that day on, Logan stopped trying to confide in his dad. He found solace in reading comic books in his bedroom or riding his bike around the neighborhood, even in chilly weather. On weekends, Andrew and Natalie planned wedding details, choosing a photographer, sampling a wedding cake, finalizing invitations. Logan felt invisible, like his presence was nothing more than an afterthought. One afternoon, Logan overheard Natalie talking to her friend Brianna over the phone. He was in the hallway, poised to knock on the door, but froze when he heard Natalie's voice. "I don't know how I'm handling that kid," Natalie said. "He's more trouble than he's worth. But Andrew's a catch, so I guess it's part of the package." Logan's eyes brimmed with tears. He tiptoed back to his room, feeling unwanted and powerless. About a month before the wedding, Logan's sleeplessness got worse. One night, just shy of midnight, he shuffled into the kitchen for a glass of water. He heard a hushed voice coming from the living room and peered around the corner. It was Natalie, pacing in her pajamas, speaking urgently into her phone. "Mark, calm down," she whispered harshly. "We can't rush this. Everything has to be perfect." Logan's pulse quickened. He'd never heard Natalie sound so rattled. "Yes, the wedding is in 2 weeks," she continued, passing a hand over her forehead. "After that, we move on to phase 2. Once we get the insurance payout, we'll be set for life." "Insurance payout?" Logan held his breath, his mind spinning. "That brat Logan is the only problem," Natalie hissed. "He's suspicious, and I can't let him ruin our plan. Andrew's too blinded by love to believe anything his kid says. Just stick to the plan, Mark. I'll handle the boy if I have to." Logan stifled a gasp, inching backward until he was safe in the dark hallway. He made it to his bedroom just as Natalie ended the call. Heart hammering in his chest, Logan slid under his covers, replaying the conversation in his head. Natalie planned to con his father out of an insurance policy, and from the sound of it, she wasn't afraid to hurt them if it meant getting the money. In the following days, Logan watched Natalie like a detective trailing a suspect. She left the house for hours under the guise of last-minute wedding arrangements, always in a rush to get off the phone if Andrew or Logan appeared. She smiled sweetly during family dinners, yet Logan knew she texted Mark every chance she got. One afternoon, Andrew was in the garage fixing the lawnmower, and Natalie slipped out, leaving behind her sleek silver laptop on the coffee table. Logan's heart pounded with possibility. He tiptoed over, gently lifting the lid. It was password protected, of course. He tried Natalie 123 and wedding date to no avail. Finally, he spotted a small sticky note tucked under the laptop, a jumble of letters and numbers. Taking a leap of faith, he typed them in. The screen unlocked. Logan's eyes widened. There were folders labeled Andrew's schedule, policy documents, and project future. His stomach clenched when he clicked on policy documents and found scanned PDFs related to a life insurance plan worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The file name read Andrew Parker Insurance. He skimmed the details, biting his lip to keep from crying out. The beneficiary was listed as Natalie Richardson, effective immediately upon marriage. If Andrew were to have an accidental death, Natalie stood to receive the full amount. Just then, Logan heard the door to the garage slam. Andrew called from the hallway. "Logan, you in here? I'm grabbing a soda. Need anything?" In a panic, Logan closed the laptop, shoved the sticky note back under it, and scurried to the kitchen. He feigned a casual look when Andrew walked in. Hey Dad," Logan managed, taking a deep breath. "Just looking for a snack." Andrew smiled and opened the fridge. "I'm about to grill some burgers if you're hungry." Natalie ran to pick up a few things for the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. "Yeah, that sounds good," Logan said, forcing a smile. Inside, he was anything but calm. The wedding was days away, and he now had solid proof that Natalie was planning something terrible. She wasn't just unkind, she was dangerous. The rehearsal dinner took place at a cozy restaurant about 3 miles from the chapel. Friends and family gathered to celebrate the upcoming nuptials, raising glasses of iced tea and sparkling cider in toasts. Natalie wore a lilac dress, graciously thanking guests for their support. Andrew appeared happier than he had been in years, laughing at jokes and exchanging warm handshakes with relatives. Logan, seated between Andrew's sister Karen and his cousin Elliot, stared at his plate, barely touching his food. His mind raced. Should he tell Aunt Karen? Would she believe him? He remembered how his dad reacted when he tried to explain Natalie's behavior. Chances were slim anyone else would believe him without concrete evidence. After dinner, as everyone prepared to leave, Natalie pulled Logan aside. Her nails dug into his shoulder just enough to make him wince. "Tomorrow is the big day," she said in a low voice. "You'll behave, won't you?" Logan nodded, fear and anger swirling inside him. "Yes, ma'am." Natalie patted his cheek with a chilling smile. "Good boy. We wouldn't want Daddy upset, now would we?" The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Andrew and Logan arrived at the chapel early to meet the officiant and finalize arrangements. The building was small, maybe 40 feet from the entrance to the altar, but beautifully decorated with white lilies and baby's breath. The organist warmed up with soft chords that echoed off the high ceilings. Logan stood by Andrew's side, feeling like he was on the edge of a cliff. Anxiety gnawed at his stomach. The clock ticked closer to the ceremony's start time. Guests trickled in, hugging Andrew and complimenting the floral arrangements. Everyone seemed excited. Everyone except Logan, whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. When the music swelled and the doors flew open for the bridal procession, Logan's breath caught. Natalie glided forward, her train sweeping gracefully behind her. Cameras flashed, murmurs of admiration rose among the pews. Andrew's eyes shimmered with tears of joy as Natalie joined him at the altar, taking his hands in hers. The officiant began to speak in a solemn tone about love and commitment. Logan felt a lump form in his throat. He kept replaying those documents on Natalie's laptop, the phone calls with Mark, her threatening words. If he didn't speak up now, he might never get another chance. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, a hush fell over the chapel. It was the customary moment where guests remained silent, but Logan couldn't stay silent anymore. Heart pounding, he took a step forward, the velvet ring pillow trembling in his hands. I object," he said, his voice cracking. Andrew blinked, stunned. "Logan, son, what are you doing?" Natalie's face paled. For an instant, she glared at Logan with such intensity that he nearly lost his nerve. But he couldn't back down. "You can't marry her, Dad," Logan said, voice wavering. "She's been lying to you. She's planning to hurt you." A collective gasp rippled through the chapel. The officiant lowered his book. Cameras that had been poised for a perfect shot of the couple now swung toward Logan, capturing his trembling form. "What are you talking about, buddy?" Andrew's eyes were filled with confusion and embarrassment. "That's crazy. Let's talk about this outside." Natalie forced a laugh, though it rang hollow in the hushed space. "He's just nervous," she said sweetly, reaching for Andrew's arm. "Kids get anxious about changes like this." "No," Logan cried, stepping back. "I heard you on the phone. I saw your files. You have an insurance policy in Dad's name, and you're gonna—" His voice choked with emotion. "You're gonna do something awful after the wedding." The crowd grew restless. Whispers bounced off the chapel walls. Andrew's gaze shifted back and forth between Logan and Natalie, as if unsure whom to believe. Natalie's calm veneer began to crumble. She tightened her grip on Andrew's hand, nails digging into his skin. "Andrew, please, he's making this up," she pleaded, tears springing to her eyes. "He's just a child. You know how he's struggled since his mother passed. He must be confused." But Logan stood firm, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm not confused. I have proof." Andrew hesitated, heartbreak etched in every line of his face. "Proof?" Logan nodded, and from his suit pocket, he pulled out a small USB drive he'd taken from Natalie's laptop that very morning. He had copied several incriminating documents, including the life insurance files. "This is her plan," he said quietly. "She was going to." His voice shook, and he couldn't finish. Sensing the situation spiraling out of control, Natalie let go of Andrew's hand and reached for the USB drive. "Give me that," she snapped, her sweet voice replaced by raw panic. Andrew stepped between them. "Natalie, wait," he said, his eyes clouded with confusion. "What's on there?" Natalie's face contorted, realizing she'd gone too far. "It's nothing, Andrew," she insisted. "Let's just finish the ceremony." But Andrew held out his hand to Logan. "Son, let me see it." Logan hesitated, but this was what he'd planned. He dropped the USB into Andrew's shaking palm. Andrew's face was pale as he glanced at the drive. "We can check these files," he murmured, voice heavy with dread. The entire chapel watched in stunned silence as Andrew turned away from the altar. He gestured for Logan to follow him down the short aisle toward the small office behind the pulpit, where the chapel had a computer for music and audio arrangements. A few close family members trailed behind, concerned and confused. Natalie stood frozen at the altar, fists clenched around her bouquet. Inside the office, Andrew slid the USB into the computer's port. His sister, Karen, hovered anxiously by his shoulder. Several documents popped up on screen. PDFs detailing the life insurance policy, dated emails between Natalie and a man named Mark, and outlines of Phase 2 referencing an accidental demise. Each line read like a horror story, describing how Natalie would receive a hefty payout if something happened to Andrew within weeks of the wedding. Andrew's face turned ashen. Karen let out a choked gasp. "Oh my gosh, Andrew." Trembling, Andrew scrolled through the files. There, in black and white, was evidence that Natalie had orchestrated everything, from building up Andrew's trust to focusing on forging his signatures for additional coverage. At that moment, the door burst open, and Natalie appeared, wild-eyed. She looked from the computer screen to Andrew, then to Logan. "Andrew," she whispered, tears on the brink of falling. This isn't what it looks like." Andrew's voice was low and guttural. "It looks like you plan to kill me." Natalie stammered. "No, I swear, I was forced into this. Mark threatened me. I was just—" "Stop," Andrew said, his shoulders shaking. "How could you do this? To me, to my son?" Just then, the chapel's security officer and two of Andrew's relatives, who happened to be retired police officers, stepped inside, alerted by the commotion. Natalie backed against the wall, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "It's not true," she screeched. "They can't prove anything." But in the face of the damning digital evidence, her words fell flat. The officer quietly motioned for her to hand over her phone. Natalie hesitated, then threw it to the floor, screen cracking on impact. While some guests gathered outside, unaware of the exact details, word spread quickly that the wedding had come to a sudden halt. Whispered rumors flitted about: insurance fraud, murder plot, poor Andrew. That poor boy. Within the office, Andrew sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Logan hovered by his father's side, eyes red and swollen from crying. Everything he had feared was true. But at least now Andrew believed him. Karen knelt beside Logan and put a hand gently on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, sweetie. You saved your dad's life." Logan nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. He felt relief, fear, and sadness all at once. The father he adored was safe, for now, but their world had been shattered. Outside, the police were called. Natalie was questioned on the spot, frantic to call her accomplice, Mark, who was nowhere in sight. The guests, initially gathered for a joyful celebration, stood in hushed clusters as 2 squad cars pulled up to the chapel's entrance. By late afternoon, Natalie had been taken into custody, her wedding dress a cruel contrast to the handcuffs around her wrists. Andrew gave a statement to the officers, his composure only holding because Logan clung to his side, reminding him there was a reason to stay strong. The wedding, of course, was called off. The officiant, still in shock, apologized to Andrew and Logan, though neither of them could find words to respond. Some guests sobbed, others comforted Andrew's elderly parents, and many just stood in disbelief, uncertain how to process such a dramatic turn of events. Hours later, after the chapel had emptied and the petals from the wedding arrangements were being swept away, Andrew and Logan sat quietly on the front steps. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the horizon in shades of pink and orange. Andrew turned to his son, gently placing a hand on Logan's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I should have believed you." Logan sniffled and nodded. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. You really liked her." Andrew pulled Logan close, hugging him with trembling arms. "You're the bravest kid I know, and the smartest. You saved me." Logan pressed his face against his father's chest, letting out a shaky breath. "I just wanted to protect you, like you always protected me." In the weeks that followed, an investigation revealed the full scope of Natalie and Mark's plan. They had conspired to marry wealthy widows and widowers, collect insurance payouts, and vanish. Mark had a string of prior fraud charges in different states, while Natalie had changed her name twice in the past 10 years. Her relationship with Andrew was carefully calculated from the start. Andrew and Logan gave statements to the authorities, and the evidence on the USB drive was enough to charge Natalie with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, among other crimes. The story quickly spread through local news outlets. "Groom betrayed at the altar" became a headline that circulated on social media. Neighbors dropped by to offer condolences, and family friends prepared meals, hoping to ease Andrew's heartbreak. But the emotional wounds ran deep. Andrew struggled with guilt and disbelief, replaying every moment he had overlooked. Some nights, Logan found his father in the living room, staring blankly at old photo albums, tears silently streaming down his face. "I let her into our lives," Andrew would whisper. Logan, standing in the doorway, tried to find the right words. "Dad, it's not your fault. She tricked us both." Slowly, they began to heal, together. Andrew sought therapy for himself and Logan, wanting to ensure they processed the trauma in a healthy way. They spent more time doing the things they loved, biking along the trails by the river, grilling in the backyard with close family, and watching superhero movies late into the night. Months turned into a year. Natalie's trial ended with a conviction, and Mark, apprehended in another state, faced criminal charges as well. While it was a painful chapter for Andrew and Logan, they emerged stronger and more united. The scandal also taught Andrew a valuable lesson: to trust Logan's instincts and never ignore the signals that something might be wrong. On a brisk autumn afternoon, mirroring the day Andrew had first introduced Natalie, father and son visited the local park. The leaves were vibrant shades of red and gold, falling in crunchy piles beneath their feet. Andrew knelt by the park bench where Logan sat, tying his shoelaces. "You've grown a lot this year," Andrew remarked gently. "Not just taller, though you must have grown 2 inches, but in heart." Logan smiled, pressing the Velcro straps of his sneakers into place. "I guess I had to, Dad." Andrew ruffled Logan's hair affectionately. "I'm proud of you, more than you know." Logan gazed up at his father, a spark of hope in his eyes. "I'm proud of you too. You believed me when it counted." Andrew nodded, voice breaking slightly. "Yes, when it mattered most." They walked side by side down the winding park path, the crisp air carrying the promise of a fresh start. Though the day that was supposed to be Andrew's happiest became one of his darkest, it ultimately became the turning point that strengthened the bond between father and son. Hand in hand, they left behind the memories of a wedding that never was, stepping into the future with caution, but also with renewed faith in each other. Despite the betrayal, they had discovered a truth far more powerful. No scheme could ever break the love they shared as family. Why did Logan's revelation lead to such dramatic consequences? Because he exposed a sinister plan that threatened his father's life. His courage in speaking out, despite his own fears, prevented a tragedy and revealed the depth of Natalie's deception. How did this young boy's bravery uncover the truth about his father's fiancée? Logan's vigilance led him to gather damning evidence from Natalie's laptop and overhear her incriminating phone calls. His decision to risk everything by speaking up at the wedding forced the truth into the open. What ripple effects did it have on their lives? Although the wedding was called off and Andrew faced heartbreak and embarrassment, Logan's intervention saved his father from a potentially fatal scam. Their bond grew stronger, and they learned the importance of trust and honesty, even when it shatters carefully constructed illusions. The wind rustled gently through the manicured lawn of St. Anne's Chapel, a small yet elegant church nestled off a county highway about 10 miles from the center of town. Inside, soft beams of sunlight streamed through stained glass windows onto polished wooden pews, illuminating an array of family and friends dressed in their finest attire. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. A day Andrew Parker, a 41-year-old widower, and his 10-year-old son, Logan Parker, had been anticipating for months. Instead, it would become a day no one would ever forget. Just 1 week earlier, Andrew's fiancée, Natalie Richardson, a 35-year-old blonde with a radiant smile, had stepped out to run last-minute wedding errands. As soon as her car disappeared down the quiet suburban street, Logan hurried into Andrew's study. There, on Natalie's sleek silver laptop, he had stumbled upon something that made his stomach lurch. He found a PDF file brimming with legal terminology he didn't understand. But several phrases leapt out at him: accidental death, double indemnity, and a staggering payout of $5 million. Logan blinked in disbelief. Was that what his father's life was worth in Natalie's eyes? Hands trembling, Logan clicked on a folder labeled Mark. Dozens of pictures opened on the screen, revealing a tall, dark-haired man with a noticeable scar above his left eyebrow. In some photos, he posed alone. In others, he stood with Natalie, looking disturbingly cozy. Logan's heart hammered. Not only was Natalie planning something dark, she was also cheating on Andrew with this mysterious man named Mark. Abruptly, Logan heard a car door slam outside. Heart pounding, he slammed the laptop closed, powering it down just as he heard Natalie's voice call out, "Logan, are you here?" "Yeah," he answered, throat constricting with nerves. "I'm just doing homework, Natalie." She appeared in the doorway, a forced smile stretching across her lips. "Don't you usually study in your room?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes cold. Logan shrugged. "It's quieter in here," he lied, avoiding her piercing stare. Natalie's expression softened into a well-rehearsed smile. "Well, don't work too hard. I'm starting dinner soon." As she turned to go, Logan caught a glimpse of her phone screen. The contact read simply M. That night, Logan barely slept. Memories of the ominous insurance documents swirled in his mind, mingling with images of Natalie and Mark in those incriminating photos. Their plan seemed terrifyingly clear. Marry Andrew, then stage an accident that would ensure Natalie received millions of dollars. Worse, with the wedding only days away, time was running out. Now, inside St. Anne's Chapel, those frantic memories pounded in Logan's head. He stood at the front beside his father, who looked dashing in a black tuxedo. The officiant's voice echoed, "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Logan's breath caught. This was his chance, maybe his last chance, to save Andrew from unimaginable danger. His pulse throbbed in his ears. Wait, he thought. What if nobody believes me? But then he pictured his dad's warm smile, the countless nights Andrew had comforted him since his mother's passing 2 years prior. Logan couldn't stay silent. "Wait." His voice, though small, ricocheted through the hushed chapel. Every head turned. Andrew turned as well, confusion furrowing his brow. "Logan?" he asked, gently resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Buddy, what's going on?" Natalie, radiant in her white gown, froze. Shock flashed across her face, followed by thinly veiled anger. "Dad." Logan's voice trembled. "You can't marry her. She's not who you think she is." Andrew knelt down, concern etched into every line of his face. "Logan," he murmured, keeping his voice low, "are you feeling okay? Why are you saying this?" Logan's gaze darted to Natalie, whose cheeks had gone pale. "Because she's been lying to you," he said, forcing himself to hold Natalie's icy stare. "I found files on her laptop. She's planning to hurt you for an insurance payout." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. For several agonizing seconds, no one spoke. The organist in the back, halfway through a quiet prelude, stopped mid-note. Natalie let out a nervous laugh, trying to regain composure. "Andrew?" she began, voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "Logan is a child. He's scared about getting a new mom. You know how he's struggled since." She trailed off, casting a sympathetic look around the chapel. Since his mother passed, he must have misunderstood something he saw. Logan's chest tightened with anger. "No," he cried. "It's not a misunderstanding. I saw the policy, Natalie. $5 million if Dad dies, and pictures of you." He took a shaky breath. "With Mark, you're lying to him, and you're cheating on him." The tension in the chapel soared. Several guests exchanged horrified looks. Andrew's face blanched, shock colliding with confusion. "Natalie," he said hoarsely, "Mark is our wedding planner, right? That's what you told me. Is there something you haven't told me about him?" Natalie's mouth opened, then closed. She forced a wobbly smile, as though hoping to charm her way out of the nightmare. "It's not what it looks like," she insisted. "Mark handles decorations and contracts. We've discussed money for the flowers, the venue, the caterers, and of course we'd talk insurance for the ceremony. Some places require extra coverage." Logan must have misunderstood. Logan squared his shoulders. "I didn't misunderstand anything," he said, voice quivering but firm. "You've been awful to me when Dad's not around. You told me not to say anything if I knew what was good for me, but I can't keep quiet anymore." David, still kneeling, reached out and gently squeezed his son's hand. "Logan," he asked, voice trembling, "are you absolutely sure?" Tears welled in Logan's eyes. "Yes, Dad," he whispered. "I would never lie to you." Andrew looked up at Natalie, his expression heartbroken. "Please," he said softly, "tell me none of this is true." Natalie's composure cracked like thin glass. Her bright blue eyes flicked over the guests, the officiant, and the exit. Finally she hissed, "This is ridiculous. I won't stand here accused by a jealous brat who can't handle his dad moving on." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. One of Andrew's groomsmen, standing off to the side, unconsciously took a step forward, as though ready to intervene. The officiant, clutching his binder, looked alarmed. Andrew rose to his feet slowly. "Natalie," he said in a low, shaky voice, "I've never heard you talk like that. What's happening here?" She tried to laugh it off. "I'm sorry, Andrew. You know the pressure of the wedding, it's getting to me." Logan's anger flared. "Stop pretending, Natalie. I saw you with Mark in those photos. You think I'm making this up?" Natalie whirled on him, her face contorted with rage she could no longer conceal. "You," she spat, "you've ruined everything." The gasps from the congregation grew louder. Andrew's eyes widened. He'd never seen this side of Natalie. Andrew took a step back. He seemed to realize in that very moment that his son might be telling the absolute truth. "Natalie," he began, voice barely above a whisper, "what have you done?" For an instant, Natalie looked cornered, her thoughts whirling behind narrowed eyes. Then, in one swift movement, she turned and bolted down the aisle. Her white dress fanned out behind her, petals from the flower girl's basket scattering beneath her heels. "Stop her," someone shouted. A flurry of movement ensued. A few guests tried to step in her path, but Natalie dodged them deftly. She shoved open the chapel doors, letting in a flood of harsh daylight, and disappeared onto the church steps. Andrew snapped into action. Pulling out his phone with unsteady hands, he dialed 911. "Yes, hello. My fiancée just ran out of our wedding. She was plotting to kill me for an insurance policy. Please, we need immediate help." Logan stood rooted to the spot, guilt, relief, and fear all mingling in his chest. He had set these events in motion. He had saved his dad, but had also just destroyed what was meant to be a new beginning for them both. As Andrew ended his call, the entire chapel buzzed with confusion and alarm. Guests crowded the aisles, some clamoring toward the exit for a glimpse of the fleeing bride, others tentatively approaching Andrew and Logan, looking both sympathetic and stunned. "Dad," Logan murmured, voice shaky. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Andrew's eyes softened. He knelt down, pulling Logan into a tight hug. "You did the right thing," he whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I should have listened to you sooner. I'm so sorry, Logan." Their moment of tenderness was cut short by the arrival of two police officers, their badges glinting under the chapel's colored lights. One, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, approached Andrew and Logan. "Mr. Parker? I'm Officer Johnson, and this is my partner, Officer Rivera. We received a call about an attempted fraud and possible threat on your life." Andrew, still rattled, tried to gather his composure. "Yes," he said, voice trembling. "Natalie, my fiancée, she fled. She's wearing a white wedding dress, blonde hair. She ran toward the parking lot." Before the officers could respond, a commotion erupted at the church entrance. A tall man with dark hair and a scar above his left eyebrow was trying to force his way in. Logan's stomach lurched in recognition. "Mark?" "Dad, that's him," Logan whispered urgently, tugging Andrew's sleeve. "That's the guy from the laptop." Andrew's face hardened. "Officers, that's the man who's been working with Natalie." Officer Rivera turned sharply, blocking the man's path. "Sir, stop right there." Caught off guard, Mark froze, then glanced around like a trapped animal. In a swift move, he spun and dashed out into the parking lot. Officer Rivera took off in pursuit, calling for backup over his radio. The wedding guests looked on in open-mouthed astonishment. Natalie was on the run, and now Mark was too. Officer Johnson stayed behind with Andrew and Logan. "Mr. Parker," he said calmly, "it would be best if you and your son came down to the station to give formal statements. We'll need any evidence you have regarding Miss Richardson's intentions." Andrew nodded numbly. "Of course, officer." At that moment, Jack, Andrew's best man, approached. "Andrew," he said gently, gripping Andrew's shoulder, "you want me to handle things here with the guests?" Andrew gave a hollow nod. "Please, I can't face them right now. Just tell them I'm sorry." Jack nodded solemnly. "I've got you, buddy. Don't worry." With that, Andrew and Logan left the chapel in the company of Officer Johnson. On their way out, they caught sight of several more police officers rushing around the side of the building, presumably to help in the chase for Mark. A handful of guests lingered on the steps, some dabbing at their eyes with tissues, others murmuring in astonishment at the bizarre turn of events. Cameras that had been set to capture wedding photos now recorded the aftermath of a crime scene in progress. The ride to the police station, just 5 miles away, felt surreal. Logan stared out the window of the patrol car, watching familiar streets blur past. He used to ride his bike along these very sidewalks, past the local grocery store with Andrew on weekends, and stop at the baseball field for practice. Now, everything felt changed. Once inside the station, Officer Johnson led them to a small, plain room with a wooden table and a few chairs. "This isn't an interrogation space," he assured them, seeing the anxious look on Logan's face. "We just need a quiet area where you can both talk freely." For the next few hours, Andrew and Logan recounted every suspicious incident involving Natalie and Mark. Andrew spoke haltingly about his relationship with her, how she came into his life, seemingly perfect, and how she gradually persuaded him to increase his life insurance policy. Logan described how Natalie would threaten him behind Andrew's back, how her phone calls and strange computer files pointed to a far bigger scheme than just wedding expenses. He told the officers about the PDF detailing the $5 million payout for an accidental death and the damning folder labeled Mark, which contained dozens of incriminating photos. "I thought she was just an adventurous person," Andrew admitted, voice hollow. "She kept suggesting we go on these extreme vacations, skydiving, bungee jumping, even cage diving with sharks on our honeymoon. She said it would spice up life." He gave a bitter laugh, eyes downcast. "I never imagined she was trying to arrange the perfect setting for an accident." Logan placed a hand on his father's arm, trying to offer solace. Andrew turned and gave his son a small, sad smile, grateful for the boy's courage. Partway through their statements, Officer Rivera entered the room, a sheen of sweat across his brow. "We caught Mark about 3 blocks from the chapel," he said. "He tried to run, but we cornered him in an alley. He's in custody now, and talking." Andrew exhaled sharply. "Thank God." Officer Rivera shook his head, looking grim. "It's worse than we thought. Natalie, or rather Sarah Coleman, her real name, has a record for fraud in multiple states. She and Mark have been running elaborate scams for years, targeting wealthier men. Our preliminary understanding is that they'd planned to fake an accident soon after the wedding and cash in on the life insurance." A wave of nausea rolled through Andrew. She lied about her name," he whispered, burying his face in his hands. Logan bit his lip, trying not to cry. Even though he had exposed Natalie's treachery, it still hurt to see his father so wounded. "Dad, it's not your fault," he said quietly. "She tricked us both." Officer Johnson offered a sympathetic nod. "I know it's overwhelming, Mr. Parker, but thanks to your son's bravery, we've stopped them before they could do any real damage." After hours of statements, photo evidence, and phone records being collected, Andrew and Logan were finally free to go home, though they'd have to meet with detectives and possibly testify in court. The police advised them both to be vigilant. Natalie, Sarah, was still at large, although they suspected it was only a matter of time before she was found. Father and son stepped out into the late afternoon sun. The sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with a few wispy clouds, completely at odds with the turmoil they felt inside. Andrew exhaled a trembling breath. "How do we go back?" he asked, glancing down at Logan. "We left the house decorated for a wedding. Our neighbors think we're newlyweds." Logan mustered a shaky smile. "We'll figure it out, together." Andrew nodded, swallowing back emotion. "You saved my life, Logan," he said, voice thick. "If you hadn't spoken up, I might have gone on that honeymoon and never come back." Logan hugged him fiercely. "I couldn't let that happen, Dad. I'm just glad you believe me now." Their home, a tidy 2-story house on a quiet street, was littered with wedding remnants, ribbons, gift boxes, and well wishes from friends. Andrew stared at the decorations, his eyes filling with tears. The joy he had felt about starting over, about giving Logan a new family, had been brutally uprooted. That evening, Andrew's sister Karen came by with dinner. She embraced Andrew and Logan, tears in her eyes as they relayed the day's events. "I'm just glad you're both safe," Karen murmured, smoothing Logan's hair. "And Logan, you." She hesitated, voice trembling. "You're so brave. I'm proud of you." Logan blushed, gazing down at the plate of food. He felt anything but brave. He felt exhausted, rattled, and more than a little scared for the future. By the next morning, word had already spread through the local news. A runaway bride was being sought in connection with an alleged murder for insurance scheme. Residents of the small town posted messages on social media, some in disbelief, others outraged that a child and his widowed father had been targeted. Andrew took the day off from work. He and Logan spoke to the insurance company, the wedding venue, and every other business they had enlisted for the big day. The chapel staff promised to forward any security footage to the police, hoping it might show Natalie's exit route and help lead to her capture. Meanwhile, Mark's statements to the authorities confirmed that Natalie had targeted Andrew after reading about his successful company in a local business magazine. She had meticulously planned their chance meeting, attending a fundraiser she knew Andrew would visit. She slowly ingratiated herself into his family life, showing interest in Logan's school projects, offering to cook dinners, and gradually pushing Andrew to sign new policies and an updated will. In the days that followed, Andrew began the painstaking process of unraveling Natalie's lies. He met with his lawyer and financial advisor, revoking any changes he'd made to his insurance and will. The stress weighed heavily on him, but he found solace in Logan's unwavering support. As for Logan, nightmares plagued him for a while, visions of Natalie and Mark standing by a gravesite, just as he had dreamed. Yet each time he woke, he reminded himself that the worst had been prevented. His father was still alive, still hugging him goodnight. 2 weeks later, the police tracked Natalie to a motel near the state border. She had ditched her wedding dress and cut her hair short, attempting to flee under a fake ID. Officers took her into custody without incident. In her possession, they discovered forged documents bearing Andrew's name and even multiple passports under different aliases. When the news broke, Andrew and Logan finally felt a wave of relief. "They've got her," Andrew whispered to Logan, reading the text update from Officer Johnson. "She can't hurt us anymore." Despite the resolution, the emotional toll lingered. Andrew sought counseling for both himself and Logan. They needed time to process the betrayal, the near miss with tragedy, and the public attention that followed. Family and friends rallied around them. Karen arranged weekend movie nights, Jack organized a backyard barbecue so they could connect with loved ones without prying eyes. Little by little, Andrew and Logan reclaimed their sense of normalcy. They removed all wedding decorations, donated any unopened items to charity, and canceled the honeymoon trip. Andrew emailed the scuba diving tour company to explain why he wouldn't be showing up. He left out the sinister details, simply stating a change in plans. One evening, Andrew and Logan found themselves sprawled on the living room couch, watching an old superhero movie with bowls of popcorn balanced on their laps. The hero on screen overcame impossible odds to save his loved ones, a plotline that hit close to home. Logan shifted, glancing up at his dad. "Dad," he began hesitantly, "do you think you'll ever, date again?" Andrew sighed, ruffling Logan's hair. "I don't know, kiddo. Not anytime soon. Right now, all I want is to focus on us, make sure we're okay." Logan nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "I'm sorry if that's selfish," he admitted softly. Andrew pulled him into a side hug. "It's not selfish at all. It's honest. We've been through a lot, and we have each other. That's enough for me." Although the day that should have been a joyous wedding ended in sirens and scandal, Andrew and Logan emerged closer than ever. Their bond, tested by deception and fear, grew unbreakable in the aftermath. Logan had shown remarkable courage, saving Andrew from a fate neither of them wanted to imagine. Eventually, Mark and Natalie, Sarah Coleman, were prosecuted for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and other charges. Andrew testified in court, recounting how this woman he thought he loved had manipulated him at every turn. Logan testified as well, in a smaller, private session that allowed him to speak without being intimidated by a courtroom full of strangers. Their testimonies, combined with the digital evidence, sealed the case. In the end, the question remained, why did Logan's revelation lead to such dramatic consequences? Because he dared to voice what everyone else was too blind or too polite to question, exposing a twisted plan involving life insurance, betrayal, and murder. How did this young boy's bravery uncover the truth about his father's fiancée? Through his determination to investigate the strange clues he found, those suspicious phone calls, the incriminating photos, and the unsettling insurance policy. He refused to be silenced, even when fear threatened to overtake him. What ripple effects did it have on their lives? Though it shattered Andrew's hopes for a second chance at love in the immediate sense, it ultimately preserved the life and well-being of both father and son. Together, they learned the power of trust and honesty, and the importance of listening to your instincts, no matter how young you are. A few months later, on a crisp fall afternoon, Andrew and Logan visited the local park. The leaves crunched under their feet, the air hovering around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. They watched the sun dip behind a row of oak trees, painting the sky in pink and gold. Logan spotted a small family, 2 parents and a child around his age, laughing as they pushed each other on the swings. For a moment, he felt a pang, recalling how he had once hoped for a new mother. But then he turned to his dad, who met his gaze with a reassuring smile. They didn't need an elaborate wedding or a new family member to be complete. They had each other, and that was enough. As they walked home side by side, the leaves swirling in the autumn breeze, Andrew draped an arm around Logan's shoulders. It wasn't the life they had envisioned on that ill-fated wedding day. But it was a second chance, one built on honesty, resilience, and the unwavering love between a father and his son. If this story of courage and honesty resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales of bravery. And tell us where you're watching from. Your story might be more connected to ours than you think. Sometimes, it only takes one small voice to prevent a tragedy and remind us that true family is forged in loyalty, trust, and love. The afternoon sun bathed the small-town police station in golden light, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Inside, Andrew Parker, a 41-year-old widower, sat slumped in a drab, gray interview room. His 10-year-old son, Logan Parker, hovered at his side, clutching Andrew's sleeve as if afraid to let go. Only hours earlier, their world had been turned upside down by a single revelation. Natalie Richardson, Andrew's beautiful, charming fiancée, wasn't the person she claimed to be. That morning, Andrew and Logan had been preparing for a day that was supposed to be the happiest of Andrew's life. His wedding to Natalie. Friends and family had gathered at a historic church, about 20 miles from their suburban neighborhood, excited to see father and son finally find new joy after the loss of Logan's mother. Yet, in a dramatic twist, Logan had stepped forward before the officiant could finish the ceremony, and in a trembling voice, he had told the truth. Natalie was plotting to harm Andrew for a massive insurance payout. Now, in the interview room, Officer Johnson, an even-voiced man in his late 40s, closed his notepad and nodded at Andrew and Logan with sympathy in his steady gaze. "Mr. Parker," he said gently, "try not to blame yourself. These scams are sophisticated. People like Natalie, if that's her real name, know exactly how to gain someone's trust." Andrew stared at the floor, tears threatening to spill down his cheeks. I can't believe I fell for it. How could I not see what was happening?" His voice cracked with the weight of regret. Officer Johnson offered a sympathetic shrug. "They're experts at manipulation, sir, but in the end, they didn't succeed thanks to Logan's bravery." At that, Andrew turned to his son. In his eyes shone fierce pride and lingering guilt. "You saved my life, Logan," he said quietly. "I just wish I'd listened to you sooner." Logan felt a swirl of emotions: relief, love, fear, and the weight of everything he had just exposed. He leaned against his father's side. "It's okay, Dad," he said, his voice quavering. "We're safe now. That's all that matters." As the sun dipped lower outside, Officer Johnson led them through a series of final questions and paperwork. By then, nearly 6 hours had passed since Natalie had fled from the church, vanishing like a ghost into the midday light. Despite an intensive search, she had not been apprehended. "We've put out an APB," Officer Johnson explained. "All local, state, and federal authorities are on the lookout. We'll be checking airports, bus stations, anywhere she might try to slip away. Unfortunately," he added with a sigh, "if she's done this before, she knows how to avoid leaving a trail." Andrew swallowed hard. The idea that the woman he had nearly married could be capable of such thorough deceit tore at him. "I understand," he said, voice raw. "Thank you for everything you're doing." Officer Johnson handed Andrew his business card. "Please call me day or night if you remember anything else, or if Natalie contacts you. Even the smallest detail could help." Andrew nodded, slipping the card into his wallet. Then he looked at Logan, who was drooping with exhaustion, his dark curls mussed from the long, stressful day. "Ready to go home, buddy?" Logan nodded silently. He had never felt more drained. Darkness had fallen by the time Andrew pulled into the driveway of their 2-story suburban home. The front yard was still decorated with wedding-themed ribbons, and a large pastel sign that read, "Congratulations," leaned awkwardly against the garage door. Andrew turned off the engine and let out a weary sigh, gripping the steering wheel. Logan, seated beside him, stared at the steering wheel's reflection in the window. "Son," Andrew began softly, "I owe you an apology." Logan raised his head, surprise flickering across his features. "For what, Dad?" Andrew closed his eyes, fighting off a new wave of guilt. "For not believing you. For not noticing how Natalie treated you when I wasn't around. For putting you in danger by letting her into our lives. I should have seen it. I should have listened." Logan reached across the console to place his hand on his father's arm. "Dad, you were just trying to be happy again. You missed Mom, and Natalie seemed so nice," he said, a bitter note creeping into his voice at that final word. "I didn't want to spoil it for you. I wanted to believe it was just me being jealous." Andrew's heart twisted at his son's self-blame. "You could never be the problem," he whispered, pulling Logan into a clumsy hug over the center console. "You're my whole world, Logan. If I ever made you think otherwise, I'm sorry." For a long moment, they sat there holding each other, tears of relief and pain mingling. Eventually, Andrew drew back, wiping his cheeks. "What do you say we head inside and order a ridiculous amount of pizza? Logan mustered a tired grin. Stuffed crust? Andrew let out a half-laugh, half-sob. You can have any crust you want. The next few weeks blurred into one long, tangled mess of legal matters and emotional turmoil. Andrew had to update bank accounts, reverse changes Natalie had suggested for his estate planning, and meet with lawyers about the tangled insurance situation she'd orchestrated. Friends and acquaintances, many of whom had been guests at the aborted wedding, inundated him with calls and texts, offering sympathy or fishing for dramatic details. He tried to shield Logan from the brunt of the attention, but it was impossible to hide everything. Meanwhile, the police kept Andrew informed of their search for Natalie, though each update came with diminishing optimism. "We're doing all we can," Officer Johnson told him during a phone call. But Natalie, if that's even her real name, knows how to cover her tracks. She's moved from state to state before. Logan felt an unsettling mix of relief that she was gone and dread that she might return. At night, he sometimes woke from nightmares in which Natalie lurked outside his bedroom window, waiting to strike. When Andrew discovered his son pacing in the hallway one night, he decided to install a state-of-the-art security system, complete with motion sensors, cameras, and a direct connection to local authorities. "No matter what happens, I won't let her hurt you," Andrew assured Logan as they tested the new system. A series of tiny green lights blinked around their house, making it feel momentarily like a fortress. "Thanks, Dad," Logan said, exhaling in relief. "At least now I can sleep, knowing we're safer." "We're a team," Andrew reminded him, ruffling Logan's hair. "You and me against the world." Bit by bit, life began to settle into a new routine. Andrew took on extra projects at his tech firm, working late on software designs to keep his mind occupied. Logan returned to school, immersing himself in his fifth-grade classes and rejoining the science club he loved. His teachers noted he was quieter than usual, but they admired his focus and his resilience. One Saturday morning, about a month after the disastrous wedding day, Andrew stood at the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes while Logan set the table. The aroma of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air. They'd fallen back into a comfortable morning rhythm, complete with playful banter over who got the bigger pancakes. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Andrew's heart gave an anxious thump. Unannounced visitors made him nervous these days. But when he peered through the peephole, he saw Jack, his best man and longtime buddy, standing on the porch, holding a box of donuts. "Morning," Jack greeted, stepping inside. He exhaled a deep breath. "How are you two holding up?" Andrew managed a tired but genuine smile. "Better than we were. Pancakes on the stove. Want some?" Jack flashed a grin, placing the donut box on the kitchen counter. "You know me. I'll never say no to breakfast. But I actually came by for another reason." He turned to Logan, giving him a friendly fist bump. "I've been talking with a few friends, and we think you two need a break from all this craziness. What do you say to a camping trip next weekend? No reporters, no lawyers, no mention of Natalie. Just tents, a lake, and good old-fashioned fishing." Logan's eyes lit up, a spark of excitement Andrew hadn't seen in ages. "Dad? Can we?" Andrew hesitated, flipping a pancake that nearly folded in half. "I don't know, Jack. Everything that happened." "That's exactly why you should come," Jack countered, taking a seat on a bar stool. "Getting out into nature might do you both some good. It's just 2 nights, not far from town. We'll even bring an extra tent so you don't have to buy new gear." Logan looked up at his dad with hope dancing in his dark brown eyes. Andrew sighed in surrender. "All right," he said, his lips curving into a soft smile. "Let's do it." The following Friday, Andrew and Logan piled their gear into Jack's SUV, along with some friends who were eager to help them forget the drama of the past month. The campground was located about 40 miles away, tucked deep in the woods near a winding river where fish were plentiful. Upon arrival, they set up tents, built a stone fire pit, and organized their supplies. Logan loved learning how to hammer in tent stakes properly, pride shining in his eyes. Under the leafy canopy, Andrew felt the tight band of anxiety in his chest loosen a fraction for the first time in weeks. The group spent their days hiking along forest trails, scanning for deer or foxes, and their nights roasting marshmallows, telling ghost stories around the flickering campfire. Logan bravely tried to fish one morning, and though he lost his catch twice, He laughed it off with a broad grin Andrew hadn't witnessed in ages. On their last night, the stars blanketed the sky in brilliant clusters, unobscured by city lights. Sitting by the smoldering embers of the fire, Andrew put an arm around Logan's shoulders. "Thanks, buddy," he murmured. Logan tilted his head, puzzled. "For what, Dad?" "For being brave when I wasn't," Andrew replied, voice tight with emotion. "And for reminding me what really matters." Logan leaned in closer. "We saved each other, Dad. That's what families do." Andrew ruffled Logan's hair, overcome by gratitude for this resilient, remarkable kid. By the end of the camping trip, Andrew felt lighter, as though he had left some fraction of his guilt and fear in the forest. Life continued to smooth itself into a manageable pattern, until 6 months later, everything shifted yet again. It was an unseasonably cool autumn day, the leaves just starting to turn shades of copper and gold, when a now familiar knock came at their door. Andrew peered through the window and saw Officer Johnson on the front porch, his expression grave. Andrew's stomach churned. He ushered Officer Johnson inside, tension swirling in the pit of his gut. "Has there been progress?" he asked cautiously. Officer Johnson cleared his throat, removing his cap. "We found Natalie," he said softly. Andrew's pulse quickened. "She's in custody?" Officer Johnson shook his head, eyes somber. "I'm afraid not. We located her body in a motel room near Las Vegas. From all indications, it appears she took her own life." Andrew felt the world tilt. He staggered, bracing one hand on the wall to steady himself. "She's dead?" he managed, barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir," Officer Johnson replied gently. "We believe she'd been there for several days. She left a note." At that moment, Logan, who had been reading in his room, came halfway down the stairs. His face paled at the sight of Officer Johnson. "Dad?" he asked shakily. "Is it about Natalie?" Andrew nodded and motioned for Logan to join them. "We should all talk about this together," he murmured. In the living room, Officer Johnson quietly summarized what he knew. Natalie, whose legal name was likely Sarah Coleman, had been on the run for months. She was adept at evading capture, but the psychological weight of her crimes appeared to have taken a toll. The note hinted at guilt and remorse, though the details remained private. Logan pressed close to Andrew's side. "Are you okay, Dad?" he asked in a trembling voice. Andrew's face was etched with shock. I'm not sure how to feel," he admitted. "Relieved she can't hurt us, sad she felt no other way out, angry she almost destroyed our lives. I'm everything at once." Officer Johnson laid a comforting hand on Andrew's shoulder. "Grief can be complicated, especially when the person who died inflicted so much pain. Don't hesitate to seek help sorting through this." Andrew nodded gratefully. "Thank you," he said in a hollow tone. "I appreciate everything you've done." After Officer Johnson left, father and son sat side by side on their living room couch, the late afternoon sun slanting through half-drawn curtains. The house felt unnaturally still, as though absorbing the weight of the news. Logan shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, do you think she really felt sorry?" His voice was hushed, eyes fixed on the floor. "Or was that just something she wrote to make herself feel better?" Andrew sighed, staring at the family photos on the mantel, pictures of Logan's mother, who had passed away 2 years before all this happened. "People are complicated, buddy. Maybe she was sorry, maybe she felt trapped, or maybe she was afraid of facing prison." He paused, turning to Logan. "What matters most is that we learn from this. We keep going, and we never forget how important honesty and love are." In the weeks that followed, Andrew and Logan attended counseling sessions. Andrew recognized that burying his grief or anger wouldn't help him or his son. Under the guidance of a compassionate therapist, they talked about their fears, the betrayal they'd experienced, and the strange sense of finality that came with Natalie's death. For Logan, the nightmares about Natalie lurking outside his window gradually subsided. The house no longer felt like a fortress under siege. The memory of that ill-fated wedding day still made his heart pound, but now he channeled his anxieties into something constructive. He started reading detective novels, fueling a fascination for unraveling mysteries. Sometimes he'd joke to Andrew, "I could become a private investigator. I've already solved one big case, right?" Andrew would smile, sadness and pride mingling in his eyes. "You'd be the best there is." Months slid by and life settled into a new, calmer rhythm. Andrew poured his energy into fatherhood, cherishing every moment he got to spend with Logan. He also rekindled friendships that had fallen away during his brief, tumultuous engagement. Saturday barbecues, Sunday movie nights, and impromptu road trips replaced the hush of secrecy and fear. Logan thrived in school, throwing himself into math competitions, science club, and even volunteering at the local animal shelter. He made new friends and came home brimming with stories about their pranks and adventures. Bit by bit, that haunted look in his eyes faded, replaced by an easygoing confidence Andrew had worried might be lost for good. On the one-year anniversary of the day the wedding had nearly happened, Andrew and Logan decided to do something different. They packed a picnic basket with sandwiches, fruit, and bottles of lemonade, then drove out to a state park they'd once visited with Logan's mother. The weather was perfect, clear sky around 70 degrees Fahrenheit with a gentle breeze rustling the trees. They spent the day hiking a short trail, skimming rocks across a small lake and spotting wildlife. Chipmunks, squirrels, even a red-tailed hawk soaring overhead. In that peaceful setting, father and son took a moment to reflect on how much had changed in a single year. As they sat by the water's edge, watching sunlight dance across the ripples, Andrew wrapped an arm around Logan's shoulders. "I've thought a lot about everything that happened," he said softly, his gaze drifting across the lake's shimmering surface. "What Natalie did was awful, but it made me realize something important." Logan shifted, looking curious. "What's that, Dad?" Andrew smiled, brushing aside a lock of Logan's hair. "That the most precious part of my life has always been right in front of me, you." His voice caught, and he blinked back tears. "No relationship, no excitement, no promise of happiness is worth losing the bond I share with you." Logan's cheeks flushed. He leaned his head against Andrew's shoulder. "You and me," he murmured, "that's all we really need." Andrew hugged his son close, warmth flooding his heart. "Exactly." By the time they packed up to leave, the sky was streaked with pink and gold, the sun setting behind tall pines. Driving home, Andrew glanced over at Logan, who had dozed off, the seatbelt snug across his chest. The memory of discovering Natalie's betrayal still stung, but it no longer dominated Andrew's thoughts. Instead, he felt immense gratitude to the boy who had risked so much to speak the truth, and to the countless friends and officers who had supported them afterward. That night, Andrew carried Logan inside, just as he had done when Logan was younger. Placing him gently in bed, Andrew felt an overwhelming sense of relief that they had made it through the storm. Yes, the future was unpredictable, and sorrow still lingered in the corners of their memories. But they had each other, and they had hope. In the days, months, and years that followed, the story of how a 10-year-old boy stopped his father's wedding echoed through the community. Friends told friends, who told family, who told neighbors. People marveled at how Logan had found the courage to expose such a dangerous scheme. It became a local legend. Yet for Andrew and Logan, it was more than a cautionary tale. It was a testament to love and trust, triumphing over deceit. Standing in their living room one fall afternoon, Andrew and Logan recorded a short video for the family members who had been too far away to attend the ill-fated wedding. They explained how Logan had discovered the incriminating files on Natalie's computer and made the decision to speak up. Despite the risk, no one would believe him. At the end of the video, Andrew added, "If you ever sense something wrong, even if it's hard to explain, trust your instincts. Tell someone you love. It might save a life." They posted the video in a private family group, but it was later shared more widely and inspired comments from strangers. "Your son is so brave. I wish I had that courage when I was younger. Thank you for reminding us that honesty matters." For Andrew and Logan, the legacy of that day is more than just a shocking twist at a wedding. It's the proof that a single voice, even one that's small, can break through lies and change the course of people's lives. It's also a reminder to every parent and child that listening to each other is essential, especially when one notices something the other doesn't. Even though Natalie, whose true name was Sarah Coleman, never faced a court of law for her crimes, the echoes of her actions pushed Andrew and Logan to treasure what they had. They learned that genuine happiness isn't built on illusions, but on honesty, mutual respect, and unconditional love. If you found hope or inspiration in Logan's story, Be sure to subscribe for more tales of bravery and resilience. And let us know, how would you have handled the situation if you'd been in Logan's shoes? Would you have the courage to speak up, knowing no one might believe you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As Andrew and Logan settled into their daily life, making dinner together, finishing homework, planning weekend trips, one truth rang clear. They had weathered a storm that nearly tore their family apart, yet they emerged stronger, bound by unwavering loyalty. And though the future held countless unknowns, one thing was certain: they would face it together. Father and son, a team unbreakable.